How to find meaning in life beyond your role as leader. If you are not your career and you're not your job title and you're not your history, how do you identify with what has meaning in your life? Because oftentimes it's the external part of ourselves that we identify what has meaning for us. And yet, in the great resignation that happened during the pandemic, many people had to look differently at themselves and their jobs and their careers and actually shift what had meaning for them, what was fulfilling for them, what became more important for them. And so our next question in terms of how do you have meaning in your life beyond your role? There's particular questions that would be useful to look at. And Daniel, I'm reminded of the story that you've told about the research done with Harvard MBA students to kick off this conversation about meaning.
Sure. Well, the research study extended over multiple years, and they first inquired upon graduation, what are you going to go for first? Are you going to go for meaning or money? Meaning, I'll make the money first, and then I'll have the money to explore my passion, maybe purpose, life mission? Or are you going for the meaning first? And that phrase, go for the meaning and the money will follow. So then when they followed up with them a decade or two later, I think both 10 years later and 20 years later, is that paradoxically and somewhat ironically, the people that went for the money, it didn't work out for them. And the people that went for the meaning, actually few people that said, I'm going for the meaning first. And it might actually have just been one person, but at any rate, it was just a few people who said, I'm going for the meaning. Most of them said, I'm going for the money first, and then I'll have the money to go for the meaning. And how it worked out is the one or few people that went for the meaning were worth more than all the rest of them combined that said, I'm going for the money first. So our allegorical meaning of that story is somewhat surprisingly going for the meaning is probably the best business decision ultimately, especially in our time.
You have spent a lifetime researching this question of meaning and where that takes people and what that is for them. And knowing that there are about 3 questions, at least at the beginning, for a person to really inquire into and answer for themselves. And the first one of those is, why am I here? Could you say a little bit about what's important about that and what you found in your work with people?
So in my investment into this question of how do people remember why they're here and how do they step into it means that the investment really first and foremost is in the question of why. If you're clear about your why, then the what to do will become kind of self-explained by the why. And there will be a who you will need to be to step into that. So starting the inquiry, and maybe one of the important things that is a skill for our 21st century that isn't often talked about is we are now starting collectively to talk about the why, and there are books like Start with the Why, and there's that question of purpose is coming up more and more. The 21st century that's not often talked about, though, is that question, those 3 questions, the why, what, and who, to be able to skillfully embody that is a skill. That it's not just for the lucky few, lightning strikes and voila, you know your why. That it doesn't have to be accidental and it doesn't have to be for just the lucky few. So then that skill is, what's the question at the center of my life? How is my life an example of the inquiry, the self-awareness of the why? And once you have that, then moving to the question of what is not as abstract, it's founded on a real sense of skillfully developed self-awareness of the why.
Yeah, so one of the things that we've begun to do with these questions, and then I'd love to have you talk about the question of what am I called to do? The notion of the inquiry into why, we've begun to put that into business and into teams. And what we've been discovering is it's a new foundation that takes us out of our past and puts us into, there's a future that I'm wanting to contribute, that I'm wanting to be a part of. And in business, as well as in life beyond the role I am, answering that fundamental question of why am I here, to your point, informs every part of your life and where you want to be and what you want to be doing. And in this way, we can change the world. Next important part of that is looking at this inquiry that you also have invested. And I love that you're talking about it is an investment into a skill you're building. What am I called to do?
Earlier in this collection, we talked about if you want to make a change in the world, how do you know if you're ready? Then you say the investigation into the why, the investment in the skill building around your why, has you present to then what's that change you want to make? And if you say, what's the question that my life is meant to be the answer to, and what's the change I want to make in the world? So it will have a lot to do with how the what you're called to do is interacting with the landscape of your life and the business of your life and the business of business. So then that's also a question of skill. How then that inquiry, the self-aware self-inquiry that had you skillfully get present to your why is the same kind of inquiry, different questions, but same skill and same skill that helps you get present to, okay, what's the what? That would be the vehicle for that why. And then to skillfully stay in that self-aware self-inquiry until you've developed clearly a sense of what. And what I would say about this inquiry is that in my experience, the why doesn't really change over your lifetime. We change, the world changes, and then what changes is the manner in which you act on that, the what you're being called to do about your why. So that means the vehicles change, the expression changes, and we change. The why, let's probably gets deeper, wider, those wider frames we talked about. So the way we're present to our why and the way we're able to articulate that gets deeper and wider with more frames. Its essence remains the same, while the vehicles for the expressing of it evolve and change as we evolve and change and as the world evolves and changes.
So, as we look at the deeper and wider frames that this opens up, it starts to become pretty apparent that if it's a new floor, a new foundation for us to walk on, then it truly is distinct from the past. Your past has potentially prepared you with all of the good, the bad, and the ugly experiences that you've had and that you've gained wisdom from. But it doesn't come from a place of I have to fix anything. It really comes from this place of I've been prepared. And if I can engage in this inquiry of why am I here? And what does that call me to do? That I'm already, like you're saying, in a deeper, wider frame. That isn't about, I have to fix myself before. That is a part of, I may be flawed. I may have wounds. And maybe that's exactly what needs to be there for me to accomplish why I'm here. And it starts to inform the next set of questions that you invested your time and energy into, which is who does that call me to become? So if I'm not focused on having to fix my past, but I'm focused on this inquiry of why am I here? What does that call me to do? Then I naturally move into, it seems to me, who does that ask me to become?
Yeah, there's actually a couple of questions around that. There's the who would I have to be to step into this, to step into the inquiry. That's self awareness, self inquiry. Then is there's a future self. If I'm changing the world, and that means I'm changing myself to change the world, then that means I will have to be someone different. The who I am will become different. So who would I have to be to even step into the process of changing myself, following through on the what I'm called to do? That's the one question. Who would I have to be to start acting on the what? And then there's who will I become by stepping into that? And the who you'll become by stepping into the inquiry, the self-awareness and the acting on the what you're called to do, creating that vehicle might be your ignition. It might be connected enough to the why to propel you like, I want to become that future self. So what's moving through is a future that wants to happen, which includes a different you. And so when you're present to the who I would become by acting on the call of that vehicle, meaning the what, that would be the expression of my why, that might actually be the ignition to propel you to act on the who you know you need to become to act on the what or the vehicle for the why you're here and the why you would want to. So there's two levels of the who you become, which then becomes your future attractor, your ignition, your of connected to your why. Is the who you become might be the only thing you take with you when you leave this place. Then having a sense of that gives you the sense of now, okay, who do I need to be to start this process, to step into it? And as a leader, that's important for you and it's important for the people you're leading and your enterprise and maybe your community.
And now I have a new ignition for what new things I'm learning, what new frames I'm expanding into, whether it's deeper, wider, this way or that way. It seems like this is a new compass and a new ignition that's needed as we encounter what we're encountering in the world today. And no matter what or where I find myself, no matter what contingencies or situations or events are happening, I have meaning in my life because I have this compass. I've been in this inquiry and I now can walk it in a much different way. Daniel, is there a way to go into that from the vertical view?
The view that's created by your frames, your self aware view, is something you can explore in terms of, let's say, the more polarized view that we're all subject to, the good, bad. So the view then that from which your exploration of self awareness and your why, what, and who has you bringing forth an intention can be coming from the place we're all subject to of the good, bad, right, wrong, correct, incorrect, my tribe, your tribe sense, and can also come from a place of the great uplift, the anagogical, and that word means the great uplift, sense of the alchemical transformation that's possible for how that moves. That's the vehicle for your why. And the place you're coming from in your view of the who that you bring to that is a thing that can be explored in the thing we call the vertical view, so that you get a sense of where both of those show up in our life, and so that we can move our center of gravity and our orientation to that higher story, if you will.
So we have been looking at what has you make meaning of your life, regardless of the role that you have or where you find yourself. And we've talked a lot about expanding your self awareness, being a conscious participant as you recognize incoming patterns from the future. To inquire further into this, we offer a conversation in which you can explore the wider, deeper frames for whatever intention you have to bring forward in the world. If you're interested in that, give us a call.